Welcome back to the BDTV Breakfast Show. My name is Elizabeth Musa. Of course, I've got in the studio with me Mr. Mohammed Akonji, our in-house analyst, right here, ready for us to dissect what we have on the front pages of the newspaper this morning. Of course, I know you had a very amazing weekend and you're ready to, do justice to the stories that we have on our dailies this morning.
I hope you had a good weekend too.
I did have a good weekend.
Amazing. That is quite good to hear. Thank you very much. At least let's get into them. I mean, it's a weekend of, myriads of activities as well. Starting from maybe the president going from state to state. He visited about 2 states over the weekend and then raised some vital issues about the direction of the economy. And then on the global scale, because yesterday I think I was watching Trump's interview. I think it was a Thursday or Wednesday. There have been issues around maybe he's going to run for 3rd term, and then I think he was able to clear the hair yesterday. And then maybe football stories as well, tend to happen. We tend to be able to see the top 5, the race for the top 5 in the British and English Premiership heats up over the weekend. Just about 3 more games to go before the end of the season, and then at least we are finally seeing the season shaping up. By next 3 weeks now, the season will be over. And teams are really, really trying to be able to pull up to ensure that they are able to make it that top 5. This will be top 4. Does
Arsenal stand a chance?
Oh yes, we're still second, but the club is really, really bulking in the last 2 weeks. It hasn't been good. The Champions League game they had over the week last week, and then the weekend game as well. So back-to-back losses. I've actually been what the team suffered, but. This coming Wednesday will be the defining period because the return leg for the Champions League exploit will take place in France. So I know that really be able to affected my mood over the weekend. But maybe seeing that Liverpool too lost, even though they won the league anyway, tend to at least be able to uplift my spirit a little bit.
Well,
my own
weekend was good. It was the GT Bank weekend. GT Bank Food and Drink.
Oh, GTCO, that's true. 2nd of May.
So it's always like a yearly ritual, beautiful, lots of over 200 stand and lots to eat and drink, lots to buy. Wow. And so all of these vendors, they come with their A game.
Of course.
And I'm just a true Lagosian. I like how Lagos is. I like the activities that come with
the
Lagos.
Buzz around it.
I love the buzz. I love all of the things that it can only be in Lagos
that I get that.
Do this type of things, and
it should be able to get that popular that buzz.
Lagos, it started off from Friday, Saturday,
2nd of May,
Sunday.
Okay.
Yesterday was packed full. Sunday people came from church with their families, their children. It's like an outing. So usually they always do it during due to the Salah
break time. Okay.
During that break, so it's always packed full too. So I was thinking that this year probably it will be packed. But Lagosians, you see there's money. There's money. Lagosians, any opportunity to party, any opportunity to eat and drink, and because it's the entire experience. And I really have to give it to GT Bank. Sadly, the network was poor last week and all of that.
Because in fact, I thought you want to mention about the issue they had.
I'm just going to let that be.
Okay.
If
at least talk about the positives.
I'm just going to focus on the positives. Although these positives I'm saying can have their negatives because it's a bank, for crying out loud. Yeah, you are doing that, but let's focus on the things that your banking is about and
of course,
get that
your core
right.
function.
But,
so what I want to talk about was the VDM's case at GT Bank. I'm sure it was dominated. Maybe that's why I never even heard about their GTCO food.
I'm shocked. What part of what?
I'm talking about. Did you hear about the VDM's GT Bank story? Was arrested. So was there the whole media space was actually awash with GT Bank arrested him. People went on Twitter. I was on Twitter. And people were saying it was in GT Bank Abuja. So I think he complained his mom's account. There was a deductions. Unexplained deduction. So he went to the bank and then, so by Tuesday, there was a report of his disappearance that it was the last way he was seen was at GT Bank before EFCC announced that he was arrested there over cyber stalking and things. So that was even, so what people were saying about Twitter on Twitter were about 5,000, 6,000 people claimed that they have withdrawn their account from GT Bank. In fact, that was what I thought you wanted people to mention about that story. But this is good. I have been hearing about that because of in protests over that matter.
Once I see there are certain people that once I see on my timeline, I scroll past. So I really don't know
anything about that, of course.
So if I see VDM, I scroll.
Okay.
If I see Bobrisky, I scroll.
Okay.
If I see Blessing CEO, I scroll. So I really don't know. So
No,
shout out
I
to
mean
them,
it
but it's
dominated.
not
I'm
really,
sure a lot of
they are
so
not
stories were really vampire
stories.
around.
I
Oh,
only hear
GT
them
Bank.
like when you tell
just
me. But
over
if I
now.
see it on
Okay.
my timeline, so I'm just
So
telling
maybe
you
that
now. So tomorrow you
dominated.
know.
Okay,
But
that's
GT
fine.
Bank, let me go back to GT
That
Bank
is
food
just
and drink
critical
weekend.
food and drink.
It
Yes.
was beautiful. You know,
No,
the
I know
experience,
it was
the
massive.
music, you know, the outdoor, the in. My friend came. My friend came from Abuja, so she came on Friday and she's like, "Liz, is this redemption camp or what? Like this place is." I'm like, enjoy it. I know you get to see. It's always like a sort of like a reunion for me because like
you meet some other people that you will
see
to
them.
connect
You did
again.
not expect to see. You know, my friend was saying that I'm seeing all these Instagram people here. I was like, this is Lagos.
This is the connect
I'm
point.
just a Lagos ambassador. They should come and look for me because I really love how Lagos buzzes and I love.
That's great.
The
I mean, I'm really glad you to speak glowingly of it. I mean, of what have transpired.
It was truly beautiful. Everything I ate was great.
Okay. Oh.
Yes, everything I had.
Your heart there
was
great. Oh, amazing.
Was delicious, from the mango shake to the smoky jollof to the grills, like the fries and turkey. Just every single thing I had, to the chips, to the plantain chips, to the drinks, to the mocktails, to the milkshake. Look, people were spending like, some people literally came there with no budget. Some Lagos on a budget did ask some people that came and said, how much did you spend? What's your average spending? Some people said, 30. I've spent like 30,000. Some say I've spent like 100,000. And it's not a lie. It's not a lie, because when you by the time you go from one stand to
another, you definitely want people to have one thing.
I told you over 200 stands. And they're all selling different things. Plus people that are selling produce as well. When I mean produce,
agricultural produce.
No. Like food stuff.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Packaged rice, packaged
raw rice,
raw rice. I bought honey itself. Like there's nothing I did not buy. People that were selling like packaged rice, packaged oil, but it was beautiful. Well done to them. This is a new week, GT. Please get your banking in order. Maybe you focused on food and drinks over there. I've spoken so nicely about you guys, but this is a new week. Let's focus on banking, please. Even that day, the network was bad for me. Yes, so people were saying that this is bad.
And then you could not be able to.
It's still not working. But let's go to what we have on the front pages today. It's nice catching up with all of the things that happened over the weekend.
It allows you to wind down and then
It's always good to have a weekend that weekended. Some weekends don't weekend. It's just like a weekday. But I blinked and it's Monday.
That's great. That's really great.
Let's start with what we have on the front page this morning. The big story today says how AGF report refinery scandal ended Kyari's reign. Nigerians demand full probe. And then CBN cuts ways and means by 59% in boost for reform. That's the front page of the BusinessDay newspaper. It says 9.4 trillion naira FX revaluation loss wipes out operating gains. Liquidity management costs 3 trillion naira. This is where you come in, Mohammed. You want to shed more light on these stories for our viewers today?
Okay, the AGF story, right?
Yes, let's start with that one. CBN. No. Let's start with CBN cutting ways and means by 59% in boost for reforms. Then move to
the AGF, the top story. Yes. Okay, the big story there. So the ways and means have actually been a topical issue within the Nigerian, financial and economic discussion. And remember that the purpose of the ways and means is just CBN advance loans to the government when there is a revenue shortfall or when the budget assumptions are not being met. And one of the major challenge of the Buhari administration was about $1 trillion, 31 trillion naira that was actually be able to pump out to the ways and means. And it's actually good that since the Cardoso's era and after the Emefiele's time, where it was just given money every now and then, the ways and means ballooned, and that be able to affect the debt standing of the nation. So the central bank claimed in their new report that they've actually been able to slash the ways and means by about 59% from 2023 when they took over, to their financial report that they released, I think, just last week for 2024, showing that about 59% from the high of the 31 trillion that it was. And now they actually be able to claim that that have actually in 2024, the waste and means at the end of 2023 was about 7.94 trillion, and that has actually been able to drop to about 3.26 trillion. Right, that's like about 59% or thereabout of what I've actually been able to do. So we know very well that for years the government have been able to do that. And then if you look at their record on the CBN website, you see how these amounts are actually be able to apportioned. and what they have actually been quite strategic and inventive, in the ways of actually be able to give money to the government. Of course, there is actually a challenge with government being able to make a budget assumption to say this is what we project the oil price to be. But in reality, we may not be able to meet up the actual target. So the CBN often come in as a lender of the last resort to the government to be able to buffer up whatever the shortcomings, whatever the shortfalls that we have. And there are periods of windfall as well, when, we targeted this amount to be able to sell for our oil prices per barrel. If we sell more than that, they have like an account where the reserve is actually kept. But those strategic moves, they have actually been adopted by the central bank to ensure that they are able to support the government, and they're able to check the spending spree of the government so that the government will not be able to go above what is actually needed. As I mentioned, the amount ballooned, that's at 2023 to about 31 trillion or thereabout, and which was the report there. The analysis also shows that at the time, in fact, the amount was actually more than 7.5 trillion was what was actually there on the official amount. But when you look at the interest and other things that's added to it, their rate went to that high. I'm talking about during Buhari's administration. But the transparency and integrity that the new CBN administration, in terms of monetary and fiscal discipline, they've tried to be able to maintain, allow us to see the true picture of what it is. As I said, on the record there as at 2022 to 2023 was about 7.59 trillion. But analysis shows that the actual amount was in the tune of about 22 trillion to 31 trillion. But this is actually a good way, and it needs to be sustained. But the problem we're still having is what the current reality that we are having. So,
sorry, let me just come in here, because what we want to do is also to inform our audience. So if someone is watching and wondering what exactly is ways and means, what is ways and means?
Okay, so the ways and means is when the CBN act as lenders of the last resort to the government when it fails to meet its revenue target. So the government is actually targeting to be able to meet a revenue, for example, of 1 trillion, for example, and then oil prices, which is the major source. Okay, so the 1 trillion, for example, this year is about 13 trillion, 2025. That is the target. On the assumption that oil prices will be sold at $75 per barrel, for example. But in the last 2 months, oil prices have struggled to even get to $70. So there's a shortfall already. You understand? So meaning that your revenue target will be at a brink. It's already at a jeopardy to be able to meet that. So what do you do? Because this is a target already to be able to plan for a whole year. You understand? So what the central bank will now do in that result is to be able to use the ways and means to buffer up the difference. You understand? Between the projected amount from the budget and the actual revenue that we achieve. So normally, it's like a loan, of course, to the government. The central bank will be giving out the loans. So it is couched under that line item called ways and means. You understand? So it is part of the function of the CBN to ensure that you act as a lender of last resort to the government.
So when we say lender of last resort, that's when they've tried
all means, and
so
they could not be able to meet up the revenue target.
So what are those other means?
Other means could be like taxes could be like sales of remittances from abroad, sales of assets. Oil revenue is the major source, don't forget. That is almost like about 80.
Taxes,
revenue is the major one. No, revenue as the broad term. So we have oil, then we have the non-oil. There are just two sources, oil and non-oil. So oil is the major source. The non-oil cannot include borrowings, when you've tried other means. You try to be able to borrow to meet up the shortfall. When the oil prices cannot be able to meet up with your revenue projections, then the government tend to be able to look at other sources to be able to meet up the shortfalls. So ways and means is also one of them. But it is what the central bank can do as a way of assisting the government to be able to meet up the shortfall, as I said. It's majorly a matter of shortfalls. And then we have previous governments, so because of these deficits, the ways and means are always used in that regard. Even though it will not be stated explicitly in the budget, the central bank always be able to refer back to the central bank as a means of getting money to be able to, buffer up whatever shortcomings or whatever shortfalls they have. And that has actually been a major, as I said, during the Buhari's administration, one of the things that escalated our debt level was these ways and means. Running to trillions of naira, almost like a budget. And then people were blaming Emefiele. Buhari was the one there. Central bank was just able to give out money every now and then. And that's what we can be able to give, kudos to this administration. I'm talking about the CBN, monetary and the monetary side from the CBN, and the fiscal side from the government side, to try to, entrench some transparency in trying to be able to give us what happened. This is the true state. as I said, the report flying around there was 31 trillion. When they came, they said, no, actually, the actual amount was 22 trillion. Even though Emefiele was actually claiming it was about 7.9 trillion, was the ways and means. But even the official record that is there, as of last year, the amount came down from 7.9 trillion to about 4 trillion, 4.1 trillion or thereabout that it was last year. So the central bank, always be able to go into that. Then foreign exchange sometimes, of course, it's actually a result of foreign exchange differences tend to be able to create that challenge. I'm sure our readers will be able to get more detail.
You can get more details on the story.
One of the big stories. And then the AGF report, I think that was actually been flying around since last week. The Auditor General of the Federation just released their audited NNPC audited report for 2023, and there were a lot of indictment reports. In fact, as at Saturday, there was a report that Kyari is under the EFCC's net. They have been arrested over 2.2 on unexplained account. I mean, unexplained money that's actually go missing in the NNPC. So he came out to say no, he's actually relaxing and then nothing has happened to him. But the report showed. Now, first, remember, Kyari came in 2019 after my county barrow. Okay, when he came in as he promised to be able to introduce some reforms and some important turnaround, especially the refineries, the behemoth refineries that we always be able to talk about, the two in Port Harcourt and the Warrior and Delta, and he promised to be able to revamp them and bring them back to operation. Yeah, initial plan was 2023. Unfortunately, we couldn't be able to achieve that. But last year, November and December, I think both the Port Harcourt, the two in Port Harcourt and the Warrior, there was actually a report, and in fact, they celebrated it, that they've started producing oil. But now, the reverse is the case. In fact, story last year from the report shows that Port Harcourt is operating at about 40% its capacity, and the Warrior has not even been able to produce any oil in the last 1 month. So, a lot of that have actually been adduced to the reason why it was sacked, why there was that reshufflement that was done about 3 weeks ago by President Buhari while he was away in France. But the report there were a lot of indictment, as I said, especially his handling of the refinery, very important. The auditor report also be able to indicate some unexplained money that was actually like unaccounted amount that could not be explained by him, as well as the other people that was, in fact, last week, it was actually a gale of sack. The Ojulari man sacked people that worked with Kyari, the present GMD, he will be able to sack them. Yes, he has actually been able to record some success as well, because it was through him, for the first time, the audited account of the NNPC was made public in 2022, at least for the first time. Nobody knew. That place was an out of secrecy. I'm talking about NNPC before now. It was him that allows people to see the audited account. It's okay. This is the true financial position or the true financial state of NNPC. At the same time, you also be able to oversaw the Petroleum Industry Act in 2021, but a lot of scandals and controversies are really dangling on his head at the moment. Yes, as I said, there was an announced report that EFCC has arrested him before he came out to say that the media should not be railroaded and should not be stampeded into believing anything, that he's fine, he's well, and even came out to be able to show that he's relaxing after the reshufflement that took place in NNPC. But I'm sure in days ahead we'll be able to know the true state. But it will be good for you to be able to
you should just grab a copy
and the
of
other reports there will be able to give you that.
You get more on that. And just a reminder today, to go beyond the headlines. I was at the meeting last week, and then one of the things that the speaker had said, Mr. Uyedele had said was, we need to go beyond the headlines because oftentimes you see much more. So that's saying to you today to grab a copy of the BusinessDay newspaper. Go beyond the headlines. There's a lot of details. There's a lot of details. Stay informed. Stay ahead. Also, just this one very quickly. Just chime in very quickly. Supply shortfall spurs $6.7 million opportunity for pepper growers. What's in this story?
It's about it's an opportunity that people to be able to look into the pepper market.
Yes,
the pepper that industry itself. Exactly. At least you add food.
Oh my goodness.
And we'll be able to see how Nigerians can be able to tap into that. So by reading it, they'll be able to get the opportunities that actually are available in that space.
Exactly. And there's no place you get all of this business insight, all of this economical insight, aside from the BusinessDay. So you should be reading BusinessDay every day. BusinessDay, www.businessday.ng, or grab a copy of the newspaper anywhere in the newspaper vendors around you. Grab a copy.
Copy of it.
Let's see what we have on the Punch newspaper this morning. Rivers emergency rule says National Assembly counters PDP governor suit, demands 1 billion naira. This is on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. It says NAS asks Supreme Court to dismiss opposition governor's lawsuit as Apex Court set for hearing. Then NEL fund under fire over loans to ex-students. This is on page 8 of the Punch newspaper. Page 31 says Naira printing costs skyrocket by 306%. Now, we're not saying 50%, we're not saying 100, we're not saying 200, 306%. And it's not funny. Tinubu to meet Genco's over 4 trillion naira electricity debt. I'm really looking forward to the outcome of that Tuesday. Communal boundary clashes kill over 1,700 in 7 years. And then on page 39 of the Punch paper, it says Oyo signs 3.5 billion naira contract for rural market upgrade. Which of the stories do you want to take a start?
Okay. Of course, I think the top story itself caught my fancy, but the president, the PBAT meeting with the Gencos is another major challenge that I think is dominating the papers. So after last week's meeting between the Minister of Power and the Gencos in Abuja, one of the agreements there was that one of the things that the Genco members, the 6 of them, tabled was the fact that there was about 4 trillion that was actually being owed to them by the discos, for services that have been rendered, services that they have rendered in terms of supply they've given to the discos, but they have not been able to pay. And that actually be able to cut across, because there've been that challenge, that wedge between these two component players within the power value chain. So the president mentioned we would need to be able to meet them to see how the discussions what can actually be done, in terms of, because there's electricity subsidies that the government is actually be able to give, part of which is actually given across some sectors. So what is actually across some consuming segments, the rural electrification, for example, is under subsidy. And the Gencos and the discos, the wedge, the discourse between the issue between them has actually been these services, like I said, this particular amount of services totaling about this amount have actually been provided. Was about 6 trillion or thereabouts, but what they've been able to pay for was about 2 trillion. So the remaining 4 trillion has been, okay, would the government be able to pay for it through the embeds that have been scrapped? So there is this, there's like a middleman between them at the time called the embeds. So who tend to be able to receive the electricity generation from the Gencos and then sell to the discos. Now, transcos take place of that particular job, the transmission companies. So when the generating companies are around about 12,000 megawatt, what they generate, what the transcos could only be able to supply to the discos was actually very minimal. I think now, most of the time, they take around about 3,000 or 4,000 megawatts, and that tends to be able to affect the Gencos and actually be able to achieve that. So the accumulation of debt has been able to create a problem to the Gencos, and we feel like the president, the date has not been announced yet, but the president is planning to be able to meet them to see what can actually be discussed, and maybe some of these debts will actually be overwritten, because it is accumulating.
Is the meeting not on Tuesday, or am I mistaken? Well,
no, I think it's we're looking at the announcement was just made last week by the presidency.
Last week Tuesday.
Last week Tuesday was when they met, exactly. When the Minister of Power and the Gencos met. Again, the Supreme Court case, the Rivers emergency rule, is going to be able to come to limelight again today. Supreme Court, remember, it's the governor, it's a state between the state governors and the federal government. So it's going to be able to start from the Supreme Court straight today. The hearing will start today. But what National Assembly was also part of the plaintiff. They also part of the defendant that was actually be able to join in the suit. It's a party in the suit. So they've sued. They've actually be able to file a counter suit against the 11 PDP governors who have actually been able to challenge the federal government power and want a clear interpretation of that section 305, which was also rubber stamped by the National Assembly. I'm sure the firework will be able to start today at the Supreme Court hearing of this case. But the counter suit is to say that this is just an academic exercise and that they should be, the National Assembly, because of their inconvenience, should be awarded about 1 billion against the state governors. Whether the Supreme Court will be able to hear that would definitely be on the lookout to be able to see how that pans out.
Right. Let me just skim through the Vanguard paper this morning. Let's just skim through what we have on the front pages. The big story on the Vanguard paper says inflation, the headline says inflation erodes banks' profits and jerks up cost. I mean, everyone is bearing the brunt and feeling the impact of inflation right now. Gross earnings still on rising streak. Bad loans headache also rising. Their strengths, their weaknesses. Obviously, this is more like a detailed story, and you find it on page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper. It says, then on the top left-hand side says PDP defectors unwilling to register for APC. NPAN backs federal government's $220 million fine on Meta. Present crop of leaders motivated by power, wealth, and wealth acquisition. This is from Femi Okurumu. And then there's a picture from the Wema Bank 80th anniversary gala night. I mean, UBA turned 75 the other day. Wema Bank. Let's just see who's next. The First Bank or then tension in Ondo as Amotekun police clash over custody of suspect and exhibit. Now, Serap, as always, Serap and editors to Tinubu, stop Cybercrime Act abuse and free detained journalists. And then in the world of sports, under 20 Africa Cup of Nations, Morocco delays Flying Eagles qualification. Those are the things you can have on the front page of the Vanguard paper.
A lot of expectations was on the Morocco Nigeria's game. They tended stalemate, and we're looking forward to Thursday when they will play their last game, and then they can be able to get qualification.
We hope for the best, but let's see what we have on the cartoon of the day this morning on the Business Day newspaper. That's a hot air balloon. It says so we see in the hot air balloon going. So the hot air balloon is not rising. Usually it should rise.
So people are blowing
hot air. That they are blowing hot air, but it's not moving.
It's not blowing up.
It's not. It should be.
Flying
up in motion. But it's there. So presidential spokesman, you can see 3 people there. And then you see propaganda, Naira winning, GDP reduced, food, foreign exchange, LNG cheaper, refineries are working, happiness, no more then we see no more insecurity, CNG, Lagos Calabar highway, student loan, how? Now, student loan, now, subsidy gone, food prices reduced,
GDP rebased.
Then you can see the headline says hot air effectively. There's something for their blow hot air effectively. So
like blowing hot air.
Yeah, so apparently maybe it's not. They're not blowing it effectively.
I know that's you can see these are the presidential spokesperson, and I'm sure they've been the one at the vanguard of actually be able to promote. And you see them trying to be able to escalate what this administration has done and what has been achieved. In fact, one of the important responses, and I'd like to read it, was on Twitter yesterday, the response they gave to Dr. Akimi Adesina, who was comparing GDP 1960 to now, and then Mr. Bayo guy came out to be able to start lecturing him on economics. And you see, so telling him that, because he said that Nigerians today are less happy than their forefathers were in 1960. And then you see the spokesman coming out to say, yes, he's respected, but if you're using GDP per capita, like GDP per person to compare happiness and growth, like it's not a good yardstick, blah, 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 things like that. So, a lot of people have felt like this is a government of propaganda. And in fact, somebody actually be able to mention this administration of propaganda, where they just be able to, they tend to be able to thrive on propaganda and tend to be able to tell people, this is what we have done. But are people actually saying the reality? I'm sure that is what is there. And maybe even with time to be able to, inflate the balloon to make it bigger, to say these are what we are doing, and then Nigerians need to be able to say it. So let's be in their faces. And that's why somebody mentioned about just finally that the president was actually very savvy enough to ensure that he surrounded himself with media people.
Yeah,
who have media experience, and then they tend to be able to play very smart move to ensure that these are people who can really be able to, speak out and then galvanizes whatever he's actually doing out there. And let it always be able to be in the faces of the people to say, yo, if you are saying this, these and these are what we have been doing.
Well, that's where we just, close the curtain on what we call the newspaper review segment here on the BDTV Breakfast Show, as well as, just seeing what we have on the cartoon of the day. That's always a very good way for us to wrap up. As always, Mr. Suko, our cartoonist, has done an excellent job there. And thank you also, Mohammed Akonji, for your time this morning. It's always insightful, always interesting speaking to you. We'll be right back for the economy market briefing. My name is Elizabeth Musa. Do stay with us.